going back to at least 1970 or thereabouts, but could not make a case on him.
It's the 70s. There is war in Vietnam, and stress hangs in the air like a thick fog. Crime is on the rise, and at the center of it all is Frank Lucas, the Black Godfather, a heroin drug lord who distributed some of the most dangerous drugs known to man in mass to a New York that was going through serious struggles. He revolutionized the drug trade. Some argue that he has killed no one, and those who argue that he has killed countless. In this video, we will go over the life and times of Frank Lucas, from his rise, fall, and his redemption. How did a normal black kid grow up to be one of the world's most dangerous kingpins? Born on September 9, 1930, in LaGrange, Carolina. Frank was born to a typical black family at the time. Financial trouble, crime-filled neighborhoods, racism and stress. All the typical pressures and fears of an impoverished black youth. However, growing up surrounded by suffering, Frank didn't want to live like this. Like many other people at the time, he began to see the drug trade as a way out of poverty. Sure, it was risky. Sure, it hurt the community. However, it was one of the only shots that black people had for financial freedom and success. Lucas was the right-hand man of Harlem mob boss Ellsworth "Bumpy" Johnson. After Johnson died, Lucas entered the heroin trade. After a while, he was able to set up a distribution network centered around blue magic, a pure and highly potent form of heroin, which was known for being highly effective. In a sense, its effects were practically magical in terms of sheer efficacy. It's as if the fairy godmother blessed you to have the best trip in your life and blessed the dealer with heavy pockets. However, this wasn't just any boring old network. Most dealers and drug traffickers would have to get their stuff from middlemen trafficking in the good stuff from Asia. However, Frank had friends, and a few of them happened to be soldiers in Vietnam. So what he did was have those soldiers sneak crates of blue magic onto planes and supply lines so that Frank could then sweep in and misplace those boxes when they touched down at military locations. It was risky, however. By cutting out the middleman, Frank was able to offer cheaper, purer heroin that wasn't being sold on the streets of Harlem. Besides, the story and the idea that the drugs came from Asia only really helped to make them sell better. I mean, if you're going through all the trouble they have to be good quality stuff. This business model would quickly result in Lucas's small network growing until he was able to build one of America's largest and most dangerous crime empires. His empire was so large and so terrifying to the normal man that they called him the Black Godfather. By the mid-1970s, Lucas controlled most of the heroin market in New York. Think about it. Would you prefer to buy your fix of heroin from the guy who sells expensive and frankly suboptimal heroin that doesn't even give you a good high and has a decent chance of being laced or watered down? Or would you prefer to buy heroin from the guy who sells it for cheap, has really good product, and is large enough that he has a reputation to keep, so he can't afford to sell bad product? The choice was obvious for the majority of New York's heroin addicts. His reputation and connections quickly let him dominate the trade. Where there is fire, there's smoke. Frank enjoyed his little fire quite a lot, but the police could smell the smoke. The police had set up undercover investigation operations from the police. They started in the 1970s with simple, smaller-scale investigations into the operation. It's stuff like having a few fake police officers or a few fake gang enforcers. This let them gather a lot of preliminary information that helped them to start scaling up the operation and start their large-scale investigation around 1975. The investigation was very fruitful, resulting in many pieces of useful evidence, and most importantly, they were able to arrest Frank. According to their findings, he was making $1 million every day. That's at least $365 million every year. He's been getting away with his crime empire for years, so it's safe to say that Frank had stolen billions of dollars from the people. Frank was charged with drug trafficking charges in 1976. Court ruling, 70 years in the lockbox. The arrest was possible thanks to the undercovering operation. However, another key figure in the Frank Lucas story is Richie Roberts, the lead detective on the case. He was the key figure behind many of the initial and later steps in the investigation, and was pivotal in planning the large-scale undercover operation into Frank Lucas. Frank was done with crime. He was in the slammer, so it's not like he could run his illicit empire there, even if he wanted to. However, that didn't mean that Frank didn't still have value. However, this time his value wasn't to the drug trade, it was to the police. Think about it. They just captured one of the most powerful drug kingpins in the US, and they have the perfect opportunity to drill out any information that he could have on the world of drugs. They turned Frank into an informant for the police. He would share a lot of information, leading to the arrest of several officers, some of whom were involved in his operations. After such an interesting life, it's no wonder that Hollywood had to get their hands on it. In 2007, the film American Gangster was released, starring Denzel Washington as Frank and Russell Crowe as Richie Roberts. This was a film which took many liberties with the real story of what happened. However, it's a thrilling and gripping film which will have you on the edge of your seat from start to finish. After serving time in prison, Frank was a changed man. He was forced to confront the reality of what crime and time in prison are like, and that was enough to make him change his ways. Although you might be a bit confused, I stressed earlier how his sentence was 70 years long. He died in 2019, so the math shouldn't add up. The thing is that because of his role as an informant to the police, he was able to facilitate the arrest of over 100 drug-related cases. Due to the immense aid that he provided the police, he was relieved after serving only about 5 years in prison. He was to live on parole for the rest of his life. In 1984, only 3 years after his initial release, he was arrested again on drug charges. This resulted in him serving another 7 years in prison, resulting in his release in 1991. In light of many critiques and controversies about his past and the way his criminal organization operated, Lucas tries to defend his actions with the claim that he's as non-violent as possible in the way he runs his organization. He argues that when he planned his operations, they avoided unnecessary bloodshed and violence. However, many oppose this idea because, to keep his operations running smoothly, Frank often didn't have any other choice but to resort to brutal enforcement methods. Because of that, he was responsible for the deaths of many people due to the inherited violence of the drug trade that can't be avoided due to the nature of work in the criminal sector. In addition to that, there are further arguments to be made that regardless of whether Frank killed people directly, he did kill people indirectly, either ruining their lives through drugs or through heroin overdoses which have taken countless lives. Frank Lucas's life encapsulates a dramatic saga of ambition, crime, downfall, and a complex quest for redemption. Emerging from the adversities of his early years, he constructed a narcotics empire that left an indelible mark on New York City's history. His innovative yet illicit operations not only redefined the drug trade, but also led to significant legal reforms and crackdowns on corruption within law enforcement. Despite his assertions of nonviolence, the extensive harm inflicted on individuals and communities by his heroin distribution cannot be overlooked. Lucas's later cooperation with authorities and subsequent rearrests underscore the turbulent path of a man perpetually entangled in the criminal underworld. His death in 2019 marked the end of a controversial chapter, leaving behind a legacy that continues to provoke debate and reflection on the far-reaching consequences of crime and the complexities of personal transformation.